Hello and welcome to the Pop-Off PC Mag Show, where we talk about video games, industry news, trends, our thoughts, opinions on the latest stuff, biggest games. The show's called the Pop-Off, but maybe we should call this episode the Take-Off, because we are talking about flight video games, obviously inspired by the recent release of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Buzzy, you've been playing that game for review. People seem to like it a lot, so let's kick it off. Just what do you think about this flying game?
Yeah, it is really cool. It is the feeling of flight in a video game that maybe any other game can't give you. I think there's a lot of arcadey games, but even stuff like Battlefield or Call of Duty. If you hop into like a helicopter or a jet or whatever it is, and you're like that's a lot more action oriented. But this really, from start to finish, the feeling of flight, it's pretty incredible. There's a lot that goes into that we can get into.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, the feeling, the overall feeling of like taking off, picking a plane, and doing it in the real world is kind of a big draw. Doing it on the real map is really cool.
Yeah, now as someone who doesn't care about flight simulation, the map stuff to me was the most maybe intriguing thing of just like this kind of like playable, not Google Earth, but I guess Bing Earth, Bing Maps. That's Microsoft.
Yeah. I did laugh when I saw that in the review notes. This is Bing Maps. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
That stuff's cool.
Yeah, I took off from JFK, and that was really cool.
Imagine that.
Yeah, right. It's a great replacement for being able to go anywhere right now. I think that is whether subconsciously or directly stated by a lot of people, it's like a good replacement for being able to go anywhere. So yeah, it's really cool. The tutorials are pretty good. You start off learning the basics of reading the instruments in the cockpit and like how to read everything and what each of them means and what they're for. There was some confusion. I was trying to play, so I don't have a flight stick. I'm sorry, I'm not a hardcore flight sim guy. I've dabbled, but yeah, I don't own a flight stick. So I was playing with controller, and sometimes the controls in the tutorial got a little confused between giving me button instructions with a keyboard and mouse instead of the controller I was using. And I don't think there are buttons for everything on the controller that you can do on the keyboard. So I think by necessity, sometimes they tell you to use the keyboard.
That's weird because it's on Xbox as well as PC, right?
Yeah, so I figured there must be some way, but yet when it's like, give flight control back to the instructor, it's like Control X and another button, and I'm like, oh, we put my controller down and do it. So some of that went back and forth. There was people who don't like inverted might have a difficult time. I really fiddled around in there. I wish there was just a clear toggle for flipping the inverted book and stuff. Because
I feel like though, like flight sims are the thing that's like that's their time to shine, right?
I know it's a default, but I cannot control this camera and this plane at the same time inverted.
That's kind of the metaphor, right? Of like you're pushing down to move up.
Yeah, there's that famous game image of the joystick on the guy's.
Yeah, or just like manipulating a camera, like in real life.
After many thousands of hours of playing the other way, I had to invert it. For the plane, it's okay because you can understand it that way. But rotating the camera left and right was inverted too, and I just couldn't do that.
You should use a Wii remote.
I should use a Wii remote. Yeah, the tutorials, there's a voiceover walks you through, it makes it pretty easy to understand, and then from there there's like different ones about how to take off and how to do a flight pattern, so it really covers your bases, and then it kind of lets you go loose in the open world's actual world map. You can pick, I'm going to start at JFK, I'm going to fly to the airport in DC, or I'm going to go across the world. So yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Is there any kind of like progression, or is it really just here you go, here's a plane?
There's even a specific challenge mode, which I haven't dabbled in. It's like a course something, I forget what the name of it is. It lets you kind of seek out things to do. I don't know if it's like see so many landmarks or things like that, but I haven't looked into it.
So it's kind of adding some structure to your exploration.
Yeah, other than just free flight, which is obviously probably the bulk of the game. It's just kind of flying around and getting to do it in a bunch of different aircraft and different airports around the world, whether seeing national landmarks that you've never seen, like natural landmarks, or seeing the place you grew up, or New York City from overhead and stuff.
Did you do that? Did you go to your house?
I did fly over Astoria, New York. It was pretty glorious. Brooklyn was nice as well. The Manhattan's pretty cool. It seems condensed, but it's probably to scale. But it is odd to fly over it in a game space because
the pale blue dot, man.
Yeah, you're never that close, really.
So you said you don't have a flight stick, but do you have, I guess, what's your history with these kinds of games?
I dabbled in some of the older ones, not a lot.
Because they're like, this is the first one in a while.
Yeah, I think there was like I don't want to get this wrong, a 2007 maybe was the last major release, 2004 Series X, Simulator X. I forget what exactly it's called.
Let's go to the internet.
People a lot older than us are the hardcore fans of these games who really grew up playing. This is one of the first, I think it's a 40-year-old series, and it is like one of the first hardcore sort of PC long-running series. Like,
I mean this with all love. I think this is a perfect game to talk about on PCMag.com.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, what else? So the graphics, I will say. So it looks great, and I think anything natural looks better than sort of the buildings.
Okay.
I think some of the building, whether it is pop-in because they're loading because there's so much going on, especially if you have like the live flight mode on, which is like live weather, live time, everything like that. It's using satellite imagery. It's really making the game chug. You noticed it in the frame rate. So I ended up dialing down. To medium visuals, which got me around 60 frames. But I have a really good desktop, so I do.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I do kind of worry for people who don't have a high-end PC, because mine is I have a 2080 Super and a new Core i7. So not a lot of percentage of people have a better desktop.
Or I mean, just how's it gonna perform on console? It's on Xbox One. So.
Yeah. I wonder if it's better if it's like, we're going to make it run at 30 frames. It's going to work most of the time because it's built for this. Whereas PC, scaling it, you can go to the high end where it does look great, but I was getting like 12 frames. I had it on Ultra, which was fine for the tutorials. And once it opened, once I was flying around New York, I think it's probably the most difficult place to run because there's so many buildings and things.
What do you think is like kind of the bottlenecks? Because it's pulling in like real-time information. There's like a procedural generation element to some of the buildings, I believe.
Yeah. So you could see the Freedom Tower didn't look quite fully rendered, even though I got pretty close to it. I think some of the textures weren't quite loaded in, but I mean, I was flying overhead, so I was like, if not now, when are they going to load in?
It just reminds me of when you create a huge map in city skylines or something, you're just gonna.
It starts to chug. Yeah, I'm sure if I haven't since the tutorials took a bit of time and I learned the rest of the game. I haven't taken flights over more open nature and stuff. It was a little better on my journey down the eastern coast, over the water and over some green land. But I think the cities probably make it chug the most. But I was getting 20 frames on Ultra. I lowered it down to medium to get 60. And I think if I turned off the live updating stuff, it probably would do a hefty. I'm also playing on 1440p. That is something definitely to note. I have a 2K monitor, a QHD monitor. So I think for people playing in 1080p normal, it probably is a lot better. I tried to dial it down to that, which some games do fine, but it got really fuzzy. You can't do full screen lower resolution than your monitor is, seemingly, unless it's just a driver issue. It got really fuzzy, and I could not play like that. So I think the higher resolution is definitely part of the issue here.
So you talk about the tech being a potential kind of barrier to entry, but what about just the gameplay itself? I was reading Jeff's column, and he said, he made it sound as if it's more their options make it kind of more casual than I was expecting. Because just the name Microsoft Flight Simulator to me is almost kind of intimidating. Right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good segue. I think it is accessible. I know nothing about flight. I don't play a lot of sims. Despite that, I was able to learn it via the tutorials. I definitely feel like I was missing out on quite a few things and some things that doesn't explain well.
Because some people use these games to actually train for actual flying.
Yeah, and I could kind of see that because the cockpit instruments are all very realistic, and the terminology they use. I learned a lot about the terminology, and your plane's attitude is your level with the horizon or not, and you can use that to go kind of make sure you're diving or climbing. And it is accessible enough. You can turn on the more accessible mode. I did kind of some assists are on, not fully hardcore, not fully automated, which I feel like is kind of the ideal way to play, unless you're hardcore and you just want no assist, you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Forza model,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. It has a lot in common with that, where they use a lot of terminology. You can look at all the bars and the meters for your parts and your settings and your gas and your everything else. But learning the basics, it makes pretty accessible. They tell you how to take off. There's really no penalty for crashing. It kind of goes black and it says, restart or main menu. And, you can ruin your flight, obviously, but then, you can get right back into it. The loads are a little long also. It's kind of like going into that tutorials took a bit, the main menu took a bit. Once you're into the world, it's obviously open, so I think there's a lot to pull up before it kind of releases you. But yeah, there are some hefty load times, and I have it on an M.2 SSD, so it can't really be much faster than that. And it's still taking a good amount of time.
But you're feeling it overall?
I'm feeling it overall. I think it's really cool. I think the feeling of once you have to be because like you said, it's a little intimidating. You have to meet it halfway to be willing to learn the terminology, and not even so much terminology, but they do kind of use it.
There's so much awful terminology in video games already. You might as well learn some that applies to the real world.
It might as well be real, right?
You know,
I learned more about...
Do you do any ganking in these planes?
No plane ganks. Yeah, I learned more about planes probably in my several hours playing this so far than I ever knew. So at least, like you said, at least it is real world information. And yeah, I mean, it is fun once you kind of meet it halfway and are willing to know that you have to both between tweaking your settings, tweaking the controls to your liking, and learning the basics. Like, you have to be a barrier of entry, a little bit of effort just to get yourself in the door. And if you're at all interested, it's worth it, because once you're actually flying around, it's really cool. It's a little less relaxing than I would think it would be, especially because there's really no fail state or penalties really or anything.
You say more relaxing?
Less relaxing than
less relaxing, okay.
Because I think it's kind of like it's more thrilling, less relaxing.
Oh, okay. So you mean as a positive?
Yeah, you're like, I think maybe if you turned all the assists on and you really just wanted to cruise, or you got really good at it, and it is that easy to do. When you're new, it's actually kind of like a little nerve-wracking. Like, oh, I don't want to mess up. Like, even though, like I said, there's not really much penalty. There's nothing you're going to lose the game over. But it is kind of like, okay, I want to do this right. I got to take off, make sure I'm at speed, got to keep level. The guy will kind of say stuff in your ear. It'll give you like a warning that you're going too fast, or you need to climb or whatever.
That's Bill Gates who's talking in your ear.
Yeah, it's Bill Gates himself. He's in your ear constantly.
Cool.
But yeah, it's kind of exciting. It's kind of exciting to fly because you feel like you want to do it right. It has like a weird sense of like the authenticity makes you kind of buy into it, makes you want to invest in it and get really into it, because it is a simulator. It's not meant to be an arcade experience. It is like, I'll keep my heading. I'm gonna call in on the radio, report my progress. Yeah, it's interesting in that way. Makes you think differently than you might think you would.
That's all very cool. As someone who doesn't want to learn anything ever again, though, I gravitate towards more arcadey stuff, and we thought we would take these last couple of minutes talking about other flight games from other kind of serious ones. So just stuff where you're just flying around. You're a fox with a dope last name. Just other kind of flight stuff. So I'm just gonna do some of the games I thought of here. Remember Factor 5? Remember that company?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Star Wars.
Yeah, they kind of blew up, making these like pretty good Star Wars like dogfighting games like Rogue Squadron and all that, until they made Lair and Self-Destructed. But that's flying a Star Wars spaceship is a really kind of powerful space fantasy that I just realized right now we're gonna see again in like 2 months.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about this upcoming gen or this time, but we're getting back into flight sim time apparently. I guess it was time to revive these games. The visual fidelity is there. The faster load times are there. I think these devs were plumbing the depths for ideas in the Star Wars, at least. That was a good thing to capitalize on with the modern technology, because that game does look great from what I've seen.
Those Star Wars games look great.
Yeah,
even when they're bad.
Yeah.
What about you? Any other flying games you enjoy from your youth?
Rogue Squadron and Star Fox, probably the two most like flying games. Far more arcadey than Flight Simulator would be.
Yeah.
Trying to think of others.
Tom Clancy's Hawks. We were talking about this morning.
I did make a joke about Hawks, but I've not actually played Hawks.
Played Pilot Wings back in the day. That's a little bit. Not like sim. Pilot Wings.
A very little bit of Pilot Wings. Yeah.
That's not really a sim, but it's also not about combat, which I always thought was interesting.
Yeah, kind of halfway. The vibe of Microsoft Flight Sim without the hardcore nature of it, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever played Ace Combat. I really didn't.
Yeah. Those games are great.
There's one on the Xbox 2, Crimson Skies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Panzer Dragoon, which is kind of more like a Star Fox. We were talking to you about Dark Void. That's a game we were flying with a jetpack, not in a plane.
Mm-hmm.
People have kind of struggled to make Superman flight games work because you can just do anything.
Yeah, Heroes are hard.
Hawken, that's a different game, right? Anthem, the jetpacks and that.
Yeah, which was really one of the only successes of that game.
Did you hear that? Oh.
The fact that it felt good to fly in was one of its few positives, seemingly. But yeah, more of the arcadey stuff for sure, which does make it fun. Stuff like Star Wars, if you're just zipping around shooting lasers and it's not like difficult to figure that all out, it makes it a lot more accessible. But I think Flight Sim is going to encourage people to get over that hump. If you're at all interested, you can put in the like minimum floor effort to get into that game.
Yeah. So if you're interested, yeah, well, we have a column up now. By the time this is out, we might have the review up. We have a list about can your PC even run this, so you can check that out before you dive in. But yeah, flight simulators, they're back. It's back. 2020.
I think it's going to be really good for the people who are really excited about this game. I think it's a good version of it.
That sounds great. Matt Buzzy, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.